Okay, welcome to our talk today. We're going to look at the concept of HubSpot objects, and the title of our talk is HubSpot Objects, a framework for understanding the entire platform. Why are we looking at this? Because I've helped hundreds of enterprise level B2B companies onboard onto HubSpot, implement advanced custom HubSpot setups and configurations. And there is this initial barrier where customers don't really understand what exactly HubSpot is, and they're overwhelmed by the hundreds of legacy features and the dozens and dozens of new features that HubSpot's coming out with every day. So I've developed this framework to help explain to new HubSpot customers exactly what HubSpot is, and basically bringing it back to these 4 simple object types or record types. So all this is a little abstract. Let's hop into it. Today, we're going to be looking at basically 4 documents to understand what HubSpot is and to wrap your mind around what this platform is and what it does for you and how it can add value to a new business. So the first document we're going to be looking at is this PowerPoint presentation. The second is this spreadsheet here, which we're going to be clicking back and forth into. And the third one is just going to be this HubSpot test portal that we have here. Okay, so HubSpot Objects, a framework for understanding the entire platform. Think of HubSpot, first of all, as a collection of spreadsheets and nothing more. Now, obviously, it is much more than that, but I want you for a moment to just think about it as a collection of spreadsheets. So imagine that you're a business, an enterprise level B2B business, and you'd be surprised how many enterprise level B2B businesses are still using spreadsheets to manage everything as a primary source of truth, right? And this is a very critical core concept to what HubSpot is and how it frames its value proposition to companies. This concept of a single source of truth. What is your single source of truth at your company for who we're doing business with, what their contact information is, what transaction opportunities we have with them, and what their issues are once they start doing business with us, okay? Now, when you use spreadsheets, right, and we're gonna hop into HubSpot in a second, but I want you to imagine running your entire business using just spreadsheets, okay? Now here we've got a Google Sheet, right, and we've got 4 tabs here. We've got a tab called Contacts, tab called Companies, tab called Deals, and a tab called Tickets. So I use, for example, my Contacts tab to keep a list of all of the contacts that I don't want to have to remember in my brain, right? That's the purpose of this technology of a spreadsheet, that I don't have to remember it all in my head, right? Each row represents an individual human being, and each column represents an attribute of that human being or a property of that human being, right? So here I have a single human being in row 2, John Doe, and they have properties such as a name, an email, a phone number, a life cycle stage, which we'll get into in a moment, what company they work at, right, et cetera, et cetera. So think of each of these 4 tabs as being different, representing different things out there in the world. Contacts represent individuals I'm keeping track of. Companies represent organizations that those contacts might work at or organizations I'm doing business with. Deals represent transaction opportunities that I have with these companies or contacts. And tickets represent customer service issues that happen once I strike a deal with one of these companies or contacts, okay? So let me just go through that again. Contacts are individual people. Companies are organizations. Deals are transaction opportunities with these companies or individuals. And tickets are customer service issues that arise once a deal has been struck, okay? So each of these spreadsheets has kind of a unique property that identifies it as a contact, company, deal, or ticket. For example, does a company have an email address? Not exactly. Now, you could say, well, maybe info@company.com is like the company's email address, but that's not really how we think of the primary identifying marker of a company, right? An email address is really more of a contact or a human attribute that we would have, because at the end of the day, when we email or send something to an email, we really want it to be received by a human being. So we can think of an email as an identifying property or identifying attribute of a contact record. Companies is actually going to be domain, right? So we don't really think of human beings in terms of web domains, right? We think of them in terms of, well, maybe an email address that we might digitally interface with them through. Companies are more identifiable in terms of the domain, especially since you can only have one domain per company, right? And then a deal is going to be a little bit tougher in terms of what the identifying property would be. How would I identify each of these different deals? So we're just going to use name, right? We're just going to call it something and hope that we can kind of figure that out as we go. We'll come back to that in a moment. And tickets, we're going to identify each ticket by the subject name, right? So we might call this, we might call this ticket Brian Halligan, new ticket, and then we might add like a date or something like that, right? Like 9/1/2025. Okay, so now imagine that I'm adding contact records to this every single day, every time I meet somebody or have a new business opportunity. And then I'm adding companies that I'm doing potential business with each and every day that these contacts work at, or companies that I'm doing business with if I'm B2B, right? And then I'm keeping a list of all my deals and all the amounts, right? And I'm keeping, oh yeah, how could I forget? I'm keeping track of deal stage, I'm saying things like, new opportunity, and I have maybe another deal that's like almost closed this deal, right? And then I'm saying, okay, deal closed, right? And then I'm maybe filtering based on these values, right? All of this is very informal, very difficult to track. And then tickets, I could say open ticket, and then I could say way overdue, right? Then I could say ticket closed, right? For all these different tickets, ticket 2, ticket 3, right? Okay. So, but what's the downside of this? The downside of this is this becomes way unmanageable if you're doing business for basically more than a day, right? Because these rows, these records are going to expand to a level of being in the tens or hundreds of thousands, and managing them and using the spreadsheet as a user interface becomes extremely unmanageable and impossible. So, also, we have to think about how each of these records are associated to each other, right? What if John Doe works at the company HubSpot? Well, I could add that here. I could say, well, yeah, he works at HubSpot. Yeah, I guess I'm saying that here already. But sure, yeah, he works at HubSpot. But that doesn't show up here. Now I have to write John Doe here. Now, what if I have a deal with John Doe, let's just say John Doe, and HubSpot? I've got to write it here. But there's no connection, right? What if John changed his last name? Did John Doe a deer, right? That doesn't update here. That doesn't update here, right? So now I have to go through. Now imagine I'm having to do this for hundreds of thousands of records. All of this is completely unmanageable. But this is kind of the raw format that these values and that these data take. In HubSpot, what HubSpot does is it takes these 4 records and it supercharges them so that you can actually interact with them, okay? So you can see here that we do have actually basically a spreadsheet-like interface, right? But I can click into them and I can see, oh, okay, great. I have tasks related to this person. If I wanted to, I could send an email to this person once I connect my inbox, which we'll do at a later time. Right? I can scroll through all of these things and see what deals do I have with this person, what companies is this person associated with. So this is what HubSpot does. So for new users of HubSpot, I want them to understand that these 4 basic tabs in a spreadsheet, HubSpot supercharges them and turns them into an interactive interface. So I have all of my contacts, all of my companies, my deals, which I'll show you in a moment, and my tickets, right? Okay, and remember, contacts are individuals, companies are organizations, deals are transaction opportunities, tickets are customer support issues once a deal has been struck, right? So let's move on here. What are contacts in HubSpot? In contacts, we have 2 aspects of each record type, right? We can think of these 4 objects. HubSpot calls these objects. These tabs are each individually in HubSpot called objects. HubSpot calls each of these objects and identifies them by 2 properties. One is a unique property. That is a property that only one record can have, right? So if I go to HubSpot and I go to contacts and I try to create, let's see, a new contact with bh@hubspot.com. This email address already belongs to a contact in your database. Doesn't work. HubSpot won't let me do it, right? That's why it's a unique property. And in terms of progress, this is the journey that this record will take, right? So here we go back to contacts lifecycle stage. Maybe they're a lead, maybe they become a subscriber. Maybe then they become a marketing qualified lead, MQL, right? Maybe then they get handed off marketing to sales handoff, they become an SQL. Then they become a customer. Then they become an evangelist, right? And all of this becomes very difficult to, track, right? So what we do, and let's not get too overwhelmed by settings and everything like that here, just kind of go on the ride with me. But if I go to contact properties and I go to lifecycle stage, and HubSpot's going to make it super easy for me to hop in here, right? Field type. Here I can manage all of the lifecycle stages. Subscriber, lead, MQL, SQL, opportunity, customer, evangelist, and other. And this is meant to represent the journey that a customer will take, right? So automatically, I can go to a contact, I can pull up this lifecycle stage thing, and I could say, you know what, I'd like to display lifecycle stage. Oh, looks like it's already there. I'd like to display lifecycle stage, and I'd like to update, let's say Brian starts off as no lifecycle stage, then he starts off as a subscriber. Then I recognize, you know what, there's a transaction opportunity with Brian, potentially. So I'm going to say he's a lead. Then he becomes an MQL, then an SQL, right? So instead of just updating all of this stuff here, right, manually in a spreadsheet, HubSpot gives us the ability to automatically update these things, right? So that's how we track the progress of a contact property, a contact rather. We track the progress of a contact record as lifecycle stage. Now we do the same thing with a company, all right? Companies also have lifecycle stages because now we're thinking about things in terms of B2B. Do we have lifecycle stage here? Looks like we don't, or we don't have it displayed, right? So if we can have companies start out as subscriber, then move to lead, then move to marketing qualified lead. And in our HubSpot settings, what we can actually do is we can go to companies and we could say, aha, this took me a second to find, right? But essentially what I can do is I can click this button which says sync lifecycle stages, so that update a contact's lifecycle stage whenever their primary company's lifecycle stage changes. This setting doesn't apply when a company moves backward in your process, right? So company progress is also tracked by lifecycle stage. Next record type is deal. Now, deals are, we use a unique property in HubSpot called record ID. Now, all objects in HubSpot have a unique record ID. But for deals, there's nothing quite like an email or a domain that identifies them uniquely. So for deals, we use this concept of a deal stage. Now, for deals, HubSpot gives us this great interface so we can view them as records here, but we can also view deals according to deal stages, and we can actually view this progress, right? So let's create a deal with Brian Halligan, right? So this is going to be Brian Halligan, new deal, right? $1 million, right? And I don't actually need to do this, do I? Because Brian Halligan, new deal, and I'm gonna say, enterprise, customer, all this stuff can be put in different properties we have. I'm gonna say the amount field here, right? Deal type, he has not purchased from us before, and I'm gonna say this is a really high priority deal, right? Now, when I'm creating this deal, I can associate this with Brian Halligan. Here, you see, I'm automatically associating it. Like I would manually have to do it in the spreadsheet, but I'm automatically doing it here, right? And the company is associated with HubSpot, right? And I'm gonna say there is, let's not get into line items right now. Let's just create. And it automatically brings me into this large view, of this deal record, where I can view all of these properties of the deal, all of these activities on the deal, the contacts it's associated with, and look, I can click right into the contact there, right? If I was here on a spreadsheet and I had a new deal and I said, oh, it's associated with John Doe, and I go over to contacts and John Doe is not the top contact here, I'm gonna have to scroll through all these contacts. Where's John Doe? Where's John Doe? Nope. In HubSpot, once I click into the deal, I can see, okay, I can click right into this contact record, right? I can also click right into the contact or right into the company that it's associated with. Now, let's go back to deals. Let's look at our deal pipeline. Here, we actually track all of our deals and the stage that it's in. Oh, I've scheduled an appointment with Brian Halligan, right? Now, instead of going to deal stage and say, oh, new opportunity, appointment scheduled, right? And clicking through each of these things and updating it, with the select option, I don't have to do that. I could just click and drag, boom. I've had my meeting, appointment scheduled with Brian Halligan. Once that's done, boom, qualified to buy, right? Oh, fantastic. Brian Halligan's qualified to buy. Next step is we're going to schedule a presentation with him. Once that presentation is scheduled, boom, move into presentation scheduled, right? But Brian's got a business partner, a co-owner of his company that he needs to bring in order to validate, because $1 million, it's a lot of money, and they need to make that decision together. So we need to bring in his business partner into this conversation. Fantastic. That business partner is brought in. Business partner approves. He thinks our product's extremely valuable, so we send them a contract. Now it's in the contract sent stage. Once that contract is sent, we move to deal closed one, right? And HubSpot automatically tracks how much time a deal spends at each of these stages. So we can say, okay, if a lot of our deals are speeding from appointment scheduled, it's only spending a day here, it's only spending a day in qualified to buy, it's only spending a day in presentation scheduled, but then it's spending a month, our deals are spending a month on average in decision maker brought in. Well, this is a bottleneck. Something's happening here. So we need to apply efforts to optimize this part of our sales process, because we see this part of our sales process is bogging down our deals. And then contract sent. Maybe the problem's happening in contract sent. That would be a problem too, right? So deals, we measure with progress in terms of deal stage. Unique property is record ID. Same things with tickets. So Brian Halligan, that becomes a closed one deal, right? Fantastic. They're $1 million customer now. Well, what happens when they spend $1 million on our product and then our product breaks? Or they find a bug. Oh my gosh. Well, they're a very high value customer. So what we need to do is give them a way to submit a ticket, right? And they're going to say, oh, Brian Halligan, app broke, can't access, we have issues, right? So many problems, right? And what's the source, right? Let's say they submitted a form. Okay. And we're going to make this very high priority. And again, we're going to associate this to a contact and to a company as well, right? And I can add the timeline activity to this, which we'll see in a moment. So let's create this ticket. And you'll see, we'll get to this in a moment, but all the emails and notes and activities and tasks that I had associated with these folks, these are being carried over to the ticket, right? So now that I have a ticket in HubSpot, I can track this kind of like deal stages or contact and company lifecycle stages, but tickets are called ticket status. That's how we track this progress. When it's new, we're working on it. Now let's say, hey, we need you guys to do something in order for us to troubleshoot this problem. So we move it into the ticket status, waiting on contact, right? And we can customize all these stages. We can make these stages whatever we want. Then we move from, okay, they've gotten back to us on what we need them to get back to us on. Great. Now they're waiting on us. And then finally, our dev team's working on it. They've pushed an update to GitHub. It's all fixed now. Whew. Our ticket's closed, right? Now we have no open tickets, right? This is a beautiful thing. And your customer support reps can come in here and they can look at tickets that are assigned to them, or your HubSpot admin can come in and see what tickets are unassigned, right? That kind of thing. So we've looked at these 4 objects: contacts, deals, companies, tickets. If you understand how these 4 objects work in HubSpot, you understand everything you need to know about HubSpot up to, I'd say, about 90%. Okay. Now there's 2 other things that we can understand about these HubSpot records. The first one is lists. Okay. So we're going to go to lists here. Now imagine that you're wanting to create a list in a spreadsheet, what would you do, right? You'd have to do something like a filter, right? I want to create a filter view, and that's going to be, oh no, I'm going to create a filter view here. I'm going to create a filter, right? And it's going to be a filter of everybody, right? Who is in filter by condition, text contains, evangelist. Okay, okay, I've got my list here, right? And what happens when I reload this? What happens when I reload this page? It's still there, but what happens when I click out of this spreadsheet and come back in it again? I lose that filter, right? Okay, not with HubSpot. With HubSpot, I could say, all right, I'm going to create a list. Now there's two kinds of lists you can create, active list and static list. An active list would be, for example, a list that is true at this very moment, right? So imagine that you own an apple picking orchard and you're creating a list of apples. An active list would be a list of fresh apples. Now there's going to be new apples that are grown that are fresh when they're freshly grown. And there's going to be old apples that age out of that fresh apples list, right? That would be an active list. Is the list of apples that are fresh is always changing. A static list, for example, would be a list of apples that were grown in 2023 or 2024 or 2025. That would be a static list. So you'll have apples that are added to that list over time, maybe, but not removed, right? So here we could say, we could create a list called, and I think we already have this list here, but we could say, HubSpot employees, and HubSpot might stop us from making this list. Yeah, we already have a list called HubSpot employees, right? We could say sales qualified leads, right? So we could say SQLs, right? And let's make this an active list. And this is going to be a list where the lifecycle stage is any of SQL. Great. Now it takes a moment for HubSpot to update these things, but if I go to contacts and I update Brian Halligan to sales qualified lead, eventually he's going to appear on here. There he is, sales qualified lead. Fantastic, right? So we can create lists like that. We could also create lists of deals, right? Deals over 500K, right? And we're gonna say this is a deal where the amount is greater than $500,000. And we've got one deal currently that's worth $50,000 and one that's worth $1 million. So only the deal that's worth $1 million should show up here, right? Boom, there we go. Our $1 million deal showed up. Perfect, right? I can add additional filters, right? Deal properties that are $1 million deals that are deal stage is, for example, none of closed, right? I want to see all our open deals that could be worth more than $500,000. Right now, there's not going to be any of those on there. But if I go over and take that last deal out of closed one, back into contract sent, then it'll show up here. There it is. And finally, there's our views and lists. And views, as opposed to lists, is more like filters in the sense that I can add a filter. This kind of create an ad hoc list here where I can say, let's see, companies, right? Or I can say primary associated company is known, right? And we only have one contact where that's true, right? And I can add this view, right? Where I can say, add all my marketing contacts, right? And they're my marketing contacts. And then I can save this view and I can manage all of my views here. And that's kind of like creating a list of saved filters. And then finally, we have this concept of engagements. Now, engagements are where I can log activities such as notes on a contact record. And I could say, here's a new note, right? And I can create a to-do for somebody. And I can say, you know what? I want you to associate this with the deal and the company of this contact, not just the contact itself, right? So here we go, create a new note. That should show up in a moment. And there it is. Here's my new note. But when I go to this new deal, that note shows up there. Whoops. That note shows up there as well. And when I go to that company, that note shows up there as well. Same thing with emails. If I send an email, and we'll do that at another time, if I send an email to Ryan Halligan, right, I can have that show up on the deal and the company. If I have a phone call and I have calling enabled through HubSpot, which we'll cover in another video, that will show up at on the company and on the deal. Same thing for a task, right? I can say, you know what? I want you to make this task associated to, I want you to associate this task to the deal and the company. I want to have a meeting, and I want that meeting to be recorded and the meeting recording to be recorded on the deal and the company. So in summary, always think of HubSpot just in terms of these 4 records, and then think of views and lists as ways of organizing these 4 record types, and engagements as a way of logging information on these 4 record types. Imagine keeping track of all your emails with a certain contact just in a single column. That would become a mess. But in HubSpot, you can keep track of all your emails right here. So that is my explanation of all of HubSpot in these 4 objects, which can be interacted with via views and lists and engagements. And then you can market to these 4 objects. You can market conditionally to these 4 objects. You can create targeted lists or conversations or tasks related to each of these 4 object types. And the cool thing about HubSpot is it gives you an interactive user interface with which to do all of these things. Thanks so much for tuning in. And I hope that this helps you wrap your head around what HubSpot is as a platform and how it supercharges the concept of a spreadsheet into an interactive user interface that allows you to execute large-scale sales and marketing campaigns at scale, and to create amazing automations and reports and workflows based on all of these record types in a way that is much easier and much more superpowered than a collection of spreadsheets. Okay, thanks very much.